Dr. Paul Hard. I am the first litigant against the state of Alabama's anti-gay marriage laws. This was filed back in 2014. I don't think of myself as terribly special. I think of my story as kind of a common one. My husband and I were married in Massachusetts in May of 2011. He was killed in an automobile accident 2.5 months later. We'd been together for, by that time, 7 years. And I think that quite a few of the marriage plaintiffs around the country are in a similar circumstance. I think the thing that my case does, and a lot of other cases does, is it puts a personal face on this. It's one thing to beat your chest patriotically and say, I'm standing for traditional marriage. It's another thing when you do that and you realize it actually injures somebody else. It actually hurts them. I was turned away at the hospital. Gotten the message early in the morning when he was leaving for work that David had been involved in a car accident. I arrived at the ER and was denied access to my husband. When I finally did see David, he had passed on. At the funeral home, similar things, and that I'm being handed pieces of paper to sign as I'm arranging for the funeral that say David Fancher, marital status, never married, not nothing, just never married. Here we were, we'd been together, we were looking forward to a life together, and suddenly this piece of paper from Alabama says you were never married. And so we've had some successes with that. I received David's death certificate amended to say that I was his surviving spouse. But a lot of the other aspects of being considered his surviving spouse are still making their way through the court system. I'm not sure Roy Moore knows law. Typically, I think that most 5th grade school children can kind of figure out that the federal Supreme Court is not named after Diana Ross and her backup singers. We understand that supreme, national, federal means just that it is the superior court over the other courts. In the words of Weezer, these are not difficult questions. This is fairly easy to understand. Unless, of course, you want to roll everything back to the 1850s, where we were still struggling with that question. We had a little war that seemed to settle it. Our local probate judge, who I'm very proud of when marriage equality came to Alabama, and there was confusion as to whether the federal district court had jurisdiction, said, we settled these questions in the 60s. This is Montgomery. We're the cradle of not just the Confederacy, but also of civil rights. And we understood in the 60s that the federal courts had jurisdiction over us. We are the United States of America. My relationship has every bit as much validity as any of the Supreme Court justices' relationships with their spouses. I don't know that when we were married in Massachusetts, there was no test of devotion, and David and I were certainly devoted to each other. So I just don't get that. Of course, I find it fascinating that people are saying, well, that Ginsburg and the others should have recused themselves from the case. And what I find interesting is I think that all of those people are married, and if they're not married, they have married someone. And they're either heterosexual or homosexual. And so since they can't be dismissed from one of those classes, then there's nobody that's completely unbiased. The question of ethics is not, do you have a bias, but are you acting on it? And so it's not unethical to have a perspective. It's unethical to act on it. It's unethical to talk to separatist groups around the country. It's unethical as a justice to be writing letters to all the governors suggesting that we should have constitutional amendments against gay marriage when you're supposed to be exercising an unbiased position, even if you may have a personal bias. I really can't imagine why a physician wouldn't want to expand Medicaid. Some people have suggested that if President Obama came out in favor of oxygen, that there's a number of conservatives around the country that would suffocate themselves post-haste. And half the time I think it doesn't matter what's on the menu that the president serves up, they hate the waiter. And so they're not inclined to order anything off the menu anymore. Unless Alabama looks seriously at how it intends to fund health care and other aspects of care to children, those statistics of low birth weight and child abuse will continue to be some of the highest in the country. It's all fine to say no taxes, but we're also looking at no revenues coming into these vital services, some of which are being cut because of our current budgetary crisis. Oh, sugar, I was born and bred in this briar patch. Actually, Montgomery, I'm seeing some real changes. I have friends in Canada that I used that line on some time back that said, oh my God, we've got to get you out of there. I was like, I was born here. You know, there are unsafe places, believe it or not, in Toronto. There are unsafe places in Montgomery, but when David and I got engaged, we did it at a restaurant here publicly in Montgomery. We got the congratulations of the wait staff, and the chef sent out a free dessert. We were getting high fives from the concierge when we left the restaurant. We went out to one of the local watering holes, and they ordered champagne around the bar. So there's some places that I'm not going to hold hands with the dude in public because I'd get myself stomped. But that could also happen in Boston or New York or Toronto, sadly to say. Homophobia is not something specific to the South.